Good evening, everybody. My name is Wayne Ranney, and I serve on the board of directors for the Grand Canyon Historical Society. And we welcome you to tonight's virtual outing. The Grand Canyon Historical Society, our mission is to celebrate and promote the study and preservation of the Grand Canyon region's cultural and natural history for the education and enjoyment of its members and the public. And just last year in 2024, we celebrated 40 years of existence when the society was started by some pioneer members of Grand Canyon Village. We encourage you to become a member. Our dues are only $35 a year. We are an all-volunteer organization, and we're hopeful that many of you can join us so that we can continue to expand all of our activities like these virtual outings and in-person outings and our tri-annual history symposiums. If you do become a member, you'll get 4 issues in the calendar year of the Old Pioneer magazine, which has a lot of history articles about the Grand Canyon and the Grand Canyon region. So we do these virtual outings. We conduct tours at the South and North Rim, and you can find it on our website. Our website is very easy, grandcanyonhistory.org.
Tonight's presentation, Haley Johnson was supposed to present this, but her laptop died and she can't dial in real well on her phone. So I'm going to be Haley tonight. My name is Tom Martin. So here's Louis Schellbach in 1956, congratulating the millionth visitor to Grand Canyon National Park that year. It was the first year that Grand Canyon topped 1 million visitors, again, back in 1956. Born in New York in 1887, Don Louis Schellbach III is primarily remembered as the Grand Canyon's chief park naturalist, a position he held from 1941 to 1957. He started working at Grand Canyon on staff in 1937. Before that, he worked for the state of Nevada as the state archaeologist. He worked for the Museum of the American Indian, the Hay Foundation, the Western Museum Laboratory in Berkeley, Aztec Ruins National Monument, and the Department of the Interior Museum in Washington, D.C. He served the Peabody Museum of Archaeology at Harvard University during the Coakley expedition, if I pronounced that right, which I may not have, which involved a large archaeological dig in Panama. And he served as assistant secretary of the Explorers Club of New York City. He also illustrated archaeological papers and publications for the Carnegie Institution. In 1957, he retired from the National Park Service and moved to Tucson, Arizona, where he was hired that same year, in 1957, to work for the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum. And he was still working for the museum when he died in Tucson in 1971 at the age of 83. In 1926, he married Ethel Williams in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Ethel had graduated from Ripon College in 1921 with a Bachelor's of Art degree. And she spent the summer of 1925 in New York City, where the two met and romanced. Then they were married the following year in 21. They had 2 sons, Preston and Don. And Don Schellbach's son and daughter, Craig and Tracy, are responsible for the film that we're going to see tonight. During Louis Schellbach's time at Grand Canyon, he produced a 30-minute long film about the formation of the Grand Canyon. The film was titled In the Beginning. And most of the large national parks had films in visitor centers, but not at Grand Canyon. And here's the backstory to why this film could not be shown at Grand Canyon. Well, that didn't stop Louis. This was a really nice film, and he showed it at a bunch of other parks. He showed it at Rotary events and anywhere he could, except at the South Rim to the public, where he would run into problems. This PowerPoint is titled "A Film for the South Rim," and this is the backstory. So here's Louis, Sheep Park naturalist, and there's just a lot of really cool stuff in his collection, which is now today's museum collection. So in April of 1955, two guys, Bill Beer and John Daggett, swam the Colorado River without a boat. And you're like, wait, what? What does this have to do with Louis Schellbach? Well, check this out. John Daggett, one of the swimmers down the river, is a cousin to the president of the Fred Harvey Company, a guy named Daggett Harvey. Okay, he's got some pretty good connections there, does John Daggett. And John Daggett and Bill Beer are both into making movies. And here they are in the Grand Canyon with their cameras, just shooting film. That's Bill Beer on the left with a double stack of cameras there, making sure he can get, I mean, these guys were professional filmmakers. Bill Beer, John Daggett, and Otis Doc Marston met in Los Angeles. And Marston is the historian of the Colorado River. They met in Los Angeles in the fall of '55. Marston suggested they do a river film to be shown at the South Rim. Beer and Daggett were all in. And Beer contacted the Park Service director, Conrad Worth, who turned the issue over to John Dorr, the chief of the Division of Naturalists, Schellbach's boss's boss. So Louis Schellbach had a boss, his boss had a boss, and the top boss was this guy John Dorr. Well, guess what? Little John Dorr, as Doc Marston called him, is on the right, and the guy on the left is Doc Marston. These guys were great friends, and they did a ton of exploration together, river trips and pack trips. And so Marston's like, hey, I got a door into the Park Service for this film with a little John Dorr. They'd done all kinds of stuff together. And Dorr really quickly let Marston know that Emery Kolb owned an exclusive right to show moving pictures related to the exploration of the Grand Canyon on the South Rim. Oh, wait, remember, Emery Kolb got to the South Rim before the Park Service did. Here's Kolb on the left with Otis Marston and his wife, Margaret. This is in 1947. Kolb got there first, and he was showing a film. So it meant the Park Service couldn't show a film because Kolb's contract with the park said that he would be the sole source guy to show films. They couldn't even show a film there while he remained alive, even though the Kolb film was terrible. All these letters back and forth from all these people saying how bad this film is. Ellsworth Kolb, Emery's brother, even admitted the same in writing. It was the film was terrible when it was taken, and it is still terrible. So there was a problem here with this amazing film that Louis Schellbach had made. The cool thing about this film that we're going to watch is Craig and Tracy, Louis Schellbach's grandchildren, have a copy of the film, and they got it digitized, and that's what we're going to see tonight. There's another copy of the film, actual 16 millimeter in a can, at the museum collection at the South Rim. So that's a little bit of backstory here. And I think I covered all this ground. This film was just not shown at the South Rim. Nothing was shown at the South Rim as a film for tourists until Emery passed away. So that's the backstory.
Grand Canyon of the Colorado, kindled by the golden torches of the dawn, unbelievable in its splendor, overwhelming in its magnitude. 217 miles long, 4 to 18 miles wide, approximately 1 mile in depth. Created partly by a river, the captive Colorado, cutting slowly downward for many thousands of centuries. Created partly by an upward movement of the land itself, which rose 7,000 feet or more above sea level, speeding the river's downward flow and increasing its cutting power, a mighty masterpiece, widened and sculptured by the forces of erosion, of earth and atmosphere, the Grand Canyon, where time is translated into eternity. Fantastic buttes and painted temples born of weather, of rain and snow, of wind and heat. But the modern geologist knows that the Grand Canyon is much more than an awesome spectacle. The rock layers of this region reveal a tremendous story, the formation of the Earth's crust. A story spanning perhaps 3 billion years and divided into 5 great chapters of geologic time. The first, the Archaeozoic era, covering 1 to 2 billion years, over 1/2 of Earth's recorded time. Second, the Proterozoic era, enduring for some 500 million years. Third, the Paleozoic era, about 300 million years. Fourth, the Mesozoic era, about 130 million years. Fifth, the Cenozoic era, already covering about 70 million years. This last era in geologic time is still going on, marked during its latter stages by the advent of man, who numbers his history in mere thousands of years. Although canyon rocks are incredibly old, the Great Chasm itself was carved in comparatively recent times, probably within the past few million years. It is one of the few places where man can look down upon the open book of the ages, feel the miracle of creation, and form his theories of what happened in the beginning.
In the beginning, there was chaos and inferno, and the shattering thunder of the volcano, and great fountains of fire burst forth across the burning face of the land. Vast lakes of molten lava loosed their flaming floods over the tortured earth, and everywhere there was fire, and more fire, and the earth was a gigantic cauldron of fire. Then, after an infinity of time, there were clouds above the land, and the rains fell in a fierce and endless deluge. And now the oceans were born. And in the waters the fires were quenched, and slowly the land cooled and hardened.
Thus, over 3 billion years ago, began the first chapter in the story of Earth building, known as the Archaeozoic era. The record of this early era is found in the lifeless black rocks in the inner gorge of the Grand Canyon, among the most ancient rocks to be found anywhere in the world.
As the earth changed form, mud and sand were washed down from the high places to the lowlands, and slowly they were buried and hardened into layers of rock. The earth's newly formed crust warped and wrinkled. The forces that bent and broke the rocks changed even their very substance. These same tremendous internal pressures produced massive mountain ranges, which thrust their towering crags over 7 miles into the sky. The centuries came and they passed. And the great storms continued to beat upon the earth. Wearing down the high mountains. Slowly through eternities of time, until finally the mighty peaks were gone, and only a vast and empty plain marked the memory of their passing.
Today's geologists say this phenoplaning, or complete leveling out process, required millions upon millions of years, yet it left a very definite record. In that black schist wall of the Grand Canyon inner gorge are the roots of those vanished mountains. The flat top of the schist wall, plainly marked, is today's evidence of the existence of that primeval plain. All this was long before the time of the river, long before the time of the Grand Canyon. Similar cycles of mountain building and wearing away have always occurred over all parts of the earth, but at varying geologic times. The Archaeozoic era came to a close, to be followed by the second chapter in the story of Earth building, the Proterozoic era.
Through the dim and shadowy spaces of the ancient past, the ocean circled the earth, and slowly vast areas of the land sank beneath a warm inland sea. And the thundering storms kept at their ceaseless work. From afar, the long rivers ran flooding down to the sea, and they carried silt and sand, piling these in vast layers through yet another great cycle of time.
Then in the shallow waters, colonies of blue-green algae developed, primitive plant life, life that was born and reborn, leaving limy skeletons which slowly hardened into rock. Algae fossilized 1 billion years ago, now found in the lower canyon walls. The ancient rivers receded, but mud cracks and ripple marks are preserved to this day in Grand Canyon rock.
For millions upon millions of years, the sediments piled up, reaching a thickness of 2 miles and more. And during this time, the volcanoes spewed forth their lakes and rivers of fire.
In the Grand Canyon region in this second era, the horizontal beds of rock were fractured and broken. Gigantic blocks were tipped and tilted, forming new mountains of medium height, long slope and steep escarpment.
More centuries passed, many more. And the slow, slow workings of the waters wore away these mountains also. And the waters were stained with mud. as if with the very lifeblood of the ranges they destroyed, until time and the waters had swept away the mountains, in some places leaving nothing, not even history.
500 million years completely gone. Down near the bottom of Grand Canyon, there is a great unconformity, or gap in the record, where light-colored rocks of the third era rest directly on dark rocks of the first. The second era rocks were completely eroded and washed away. Then, some 500 million years ago, began the third chapter in the story of the Earth, the Paleozoic era.
After much more time had passed, another shallow inland sea crept over the vast hill-dotted plains, and the land sank, and the sea deepened, and the hills became islands, and then gradually disappeared. Animal life developed beneath the waters, primordial, and in many strange shapes.
Among these were the trilobites, first great order of undersea creatures, ruling the oceans for millions of years, now fossilized in the bright angel shale of the Grand Canyon walls. On the sea bottom, layers of green mud and gray lime hardened into rock, and today form the wide bench known as the Tonto Platform. Life in the early ocean depths grew increasingly varied. Then and throughout the geologic ages to come, such plant and animal life provided the organic material from which the world's petroleum was formed. On the deepening sea floor, more and more lime was deposited, both from innumerable skeletons of ancient underwater life and from chemical action in the water itself. One day to become the famous Red Wall limestone, covering 550 feet of canyon cliff. The Red Wall carries many fossils from that long-ago undersea age.
In the dark realm of the marching ages, the mighty pendulum of time swung slowly on its fathomless course, and the sea receded, and the earth underwent yet another period of change. From the north, the toiling rivers carried their sediments down to the spreading deltas, piling layer upon layer through untold centuries. But the rivers were no longer swift as before.
These thick layers of mud and red sand spread over a vast area and eventually hardened into rock to become the tremendous red beds of Supai sandstone and Hermit shale, which today form 1,100 vertical feet of the Grand Canyon wall. From this period, records of life on land are meager. A fern, fossilized in ancient rock, an evergreen frond from some vanished forest, a large insect wing, remarkably preserved, the tracks of some four-footed salamander-like amphibian, lost in antiquity. As the Paleozoic era, or third chapter, approached its end, the climate of the canyon region became progressively more desert-like.
These were times of burning earth and burning sky, of long drought, of desolation. And great sandstorms blew like maddened banshees across the dry and barren deserts, blotting out the sun with their ghostly singing, building the ever-changing dunes, burying the red deltas with mountains of smothering sand. And there were mysterious cracks on the dunes, signifying life, even here.
Tracks which today are frozen in stone. Eventually, the sea again encroached, gradually burying the massive dunes beneath its waters. The proof of these ancient dunes lies in the canyon's belt of white coconino sandstone, 300 feet of towering wall, a wall which once was wind-blown sand. The angular layers of the rock are exactly like those in a cross-section of a modern sand dune. Meanwhile, the advancing sea was gradually covering the Grand Canyon region. It was a warm, shallow sea, and in it, life slowly developed new forms, some very similar to those of today. A clamshell left by the tide, now fossilized. Lamp shells, also preserved in stone. A sea snail, and other oddly familiar sea life. The canyon's rim rock, that final 800 feet of soaring Kaibab limestone, carries many traces of the Paleozoic world. Then, some 200 million years ago, the fourth great chapter in Earth building began, the Mesozoic era.
Much time had gone. Much was to come. And once again the sea withdrew. And the rivers and streams brought down new sediments. And the floods that came down from the forested hills carried great trees to the plains below.
The trees were buried and became stone, to be exposed after millions of years as the petrified forest in the painted desert. Agate, jasper, carnelian, jeweled magic of the centuries.
Then, in the west, the earth shook, and new mountains were formed, cutting off the rain-laden winds and drying up the land below. And the earth lay parched and dying. The far winds gouged at the mountains with knives of sand. And the wind sang a dark and endless dirge. And the billowing dunes rose ever higher.
Today, the beautiful Echo Cliffs, the famous Vermilion Cliffs, and the White Cliffs are all formed of sand and sediments from that arid age of winds. Yet the Mesozoic era was also the age of dinosaurs. Their three-toed tracks, frozen in stone, show that some species once roamed the Grand Canyon region. During this age of reptiles in a world rich with vegetation, lived the predatory Allosaurus, among the fiercest of the flesh-eaters, and Brontosaurus, largest of all the great saurians, weighing some 30 tons and measuring some 70 feet from nose to tail. In his awesome world, the dinosaur had many names and many brothers, including Tyrannosaurus rex, perhaps the most fearsome beast ever to walk the earth, and Triceratops, like some primeval rhinoceros, only far larger and more heavily armored. The Mesozoic era passed, and the canyon region entered the Cenozoic era, fifth and most recent chapter in the colossal calendar of recorded time.
Slowly through the centuries, the rocks were worn away in a great series of steps toward the north. And the forces of erosion continued their relentless work. Erosion, wearing down the cliffs, or cutting with running water at their feet. Erosion, master sculptor of the ages. Time and more time, time and storm, crumbling the high mountains, until once more there was nothing, only a vast and lonely plain.
This latest erosion period lasted more hundreds of centuries. With the incredible slowness of geologic time, it wore away an immense layer of rock built up during the Fourth Era, which once covered the Kaibab Plateau. But even today, there still remain vestiges of those Fourth Era rocks, like the strange flat-topped hill known as Cedar Mountain. Only partially destroyed by the winds and the waters, it proves that the leveling processes of this erosive age are still going on today. Then, in comparatively recent times, only a few million years ago, began the story of the Grand Canyon.
The story of a river flowing toward the west. And it so happened that the land was rising, and it caused the young river to run ever more swiftly down the steepening slopes, slowly entrenching itself, digging its shallow canyon. And in the world beyond the river, 4 times great ice ages ruled the earth. The glaciers creeping down the mountains, grinding out the valleys, changing the look of the land wherever they passed. They did not touch the river or its canyon, but their distant breath must have cooled the climate. And their melting ice created many tributaries which flowed down to meet the river. Flowed down to that king of rivers, which one day would be named the Colorado. The Colorado, cutting down through time and history, cutting the canyon which would eventually reveal the tremendous story of the past.
The Colorado, still cutting today, a river 2,000 miles long, carrying through the Grand Canyon an average of 1 million tons of sand and silt and rock every 24 hours. Originally, the canyon was only a narrow gorge, resembling little the wide and magnificent spectacle of the present. The river was the entrenching tool, but the actual widening process was the work of other powerful erosive forces.
Following the constant cycle of the seasons, the snows of many winters fell upon the earth. And the canyon rims were white with bitter cold. With the spring, the snows melted, and everywhere the land was thawing, and the music of the waters made a singing symphony. And the river, swollen by many torrents, fought savagely to be free. The river roared higher like a thing alive, swift and surging in its power. Finally, the waters subsided. Another flood tide had passed.
Various types of erosion have helped to widen the canyon. High above, a rock is split by a tree root. Frost, too, helps crack the rocky wall. And always there's water, its work never done, seeping and forever wearing away. The eternal destroyer of cliff and hill and mountain. Water, scooping out the life of the rock, undercutting from below. Even the lichen plant is erosive, etching away the rock with its own acid. All of water's allies, wind and sand, snow and sun, working through those vast infinitudes of time, helped widen the Grand Canyon to that awesome immensity of today, as much as 3 billion years of earth building. The Archaeozoic era, 1 to 2 billion years, according to the ancient rocks of the inner gorge. The Proterozoic era, some 500 million years. The Paleozoic era, some 300 million years more, the time of the Red Wall. The Supai and Hermit formations, the Coconino sandstone, and the Kaibab rimrock. The Mesozoic era, some 130 million years, with its strange Cedar Mountain. The Cenozoic era, already covering about 70 million years, during which time the San Francisco Peaks were formed. South of the Grand Canyon in the San Francisco Peaks area, 3 periods of volcanic action are evident. The first occurred some 1 million years ago, the last 1,000 years ago.
And yet another time, smoke and fire rose out of the trembling earth. And out of holocaust and havoc, mountains were born. Again, the earth exploded, this time to the north, and the fiery rivers flowed once more, pouring even into the canyon, cooling and dying there. And then the volcano slept again, and the land was still. But it was a bleak and lonely land.
All this time, the canyon was being carved and widened by the combined powers of the elements, which reached their peak in the summer storm.
And so the carving of the Great Canyon continues, year by year, century by century, and on into the fading mists of eternity. The Grand Canyon of the Colorado, born of its river, of upheaval, of erosion, telling in the mighty mathematics of geologic time the stupendous story of the formation of the earth. The story written in the fire of the volcano, in the rock of the ages, in the tides of the oceans, in the endless flow of the rivers and the whirling spaces of the universe, when man was still some 3 billion years away in that long ago beginning.
Tom, can you see the chat now?
I can, I'm just starting to look at it. Thank you.
Okay. So I do have a question, Tom. They talked about glaciers, and that hasn't been something that I've heard a lot about when I've been listening to geology talks. Is that something that you're aware of that's changed in our understanding?
Not that I know of. But I'm not a geologist. Is there anyone else that can bring in an answer for Susan?
Tom, I don't think the glaciers came as far south as the Grand Canyon.
I think that's right. They would have been up in the headwaters. But I don't know that the film made it specifically clear that they were in the Grand Canyon. Is that right?
I don't think they were. I live in Alabama, and in Alabama, they didn't get this far. They're a few hundred miles north as far as they got. So
Right.
I assume the same would be true in Arizona.
Very possibly so. And again, they did talk about multiple glacial periods. So, you know, how would that tide move in and out? Yeah, good question. I see that Jonathan Upchurch had a question. Yeah, I think you're right, Jonathan. The Grand Canyon is 217 miles long, but that's a weird one. It did not include Marble Canyon, but it did include Grand Canyon National Monument. So I think that's on the west side, the west end. So I think that's right. I've got a question for you all. We tried to run this film off my laptop, and I see that there were some people that couldn't hear the sound. I had it turned all the way up. If we do this again with film, do you think it's working enough to do it?
Can I say a word, Tom? Tom?
Yeah, Paul.
You know, we could see it and we could hear it very well. I think it was gorgeously, beautifully done. The dialogue, the writing was incredible. And I think it's the kind of thing that anybody who would see it would be completely impressed with it. Although the clarity was not as good on our television screen with it. And if you showed this in a auditorium, it would probably be much better. But I think the dialogue was tremendous. I think the presentation was tremendous. The one thing I bring up is good old Emery Kolb. How in the hell could he keep them from showing this? He was an unbelievable guy. I mean, he was just he was a pittance in the Park Service, and yet he had such dynamic control. You know, the one thing that I always get a kick out of was the Park Service said he should have never built that studio on the rim, and as soon as he died, they were going to tear it down. And what he did was he got it declared before he died in his 90s a national monument, so that when he died, the Park Service couldn't tear it down. So he was an unbelievable guy, but the fact that he prevented Louis Schellbach's unbelievable movie from being shown at the Grand Canyon is unbelievable.
So I didn't include in that preamble, Daggett Harvey jumped on this. He saw the films that Beer and Daggett were making. And so he checked with his people internally at Fred Harvey, and they were like, don't touch this with a 10-foot pole, because Emery has the rights. And so John Doerr, you know, on his side with the Park Service said to these guys the same thing. I didn't know this was going down, but like you, Paul, I just found it a fascinating film. I think the visuals on Grand Falls in flood on the Little Colorado River, I've never seen anything like that before, nor the volcanic shots. Yes, this is a kind of poor copy. So the film was digitized. I got a CD, I put it in my laptop. You're watching that, but I bet watching the 16mm film would be stunning.
Yeah, I would think so.
Really
I
stunning.
think so.
But thank you all, those of you that have chimed in and said, yes, the sound was fine. And you're right, I think the digitization process through the laptop, back through Zoom to you all, it's the best we can do.
Hey, Tom, I put my headphones on, plugged it into the laptop, and I could turn it up pretty high.
Oh, great.
So
That's
it
a
worked
great
real
idea.
good.
Great idea, Dick. Cool.
Hey, Tom, Frank asked what was the year it was filmed.
Well, it would have been before 1957 when Schellbach left the park. So I'm assuming it would have been in the late 40s, early 50s. That's the best I can do.
Yeah, Tom, this is Craig. I would think that it was probably mid 50s, maybe 55-ish, around that time frame. I first found out about the film in 2015 after my uncle Preston died, and we actually found the reel-to-reel copies in his house. He also saved almost every letter he ever received, I think, since childhood. And we had shoe boxes of letters between him and his parents, my grandparents. And there were several letters where he worked part-time at Zion National Park in the early, I guess, late 50s, early 60s, and then also was stationed in the Rincon Mountains outside of Tucson here on firefighting duty. And a couple of his letters were back to my grandfather, Louis, requesting the film and the projector so that he could show that to the other staff that he was working with. I have to believe that they were bored to death here for any kind of entertainment back in those days. And in a remote area like that without television, more than likely they were, dying for anything. So, but that was the first I became aware of it, was in 2015.
Nice. And Jonathan Upchurch noted that the copyright at the beginning of the film was 1954. And Mark B notes that if you go on the internet, it says around 1955. So that's right. And that's the Standard Oil Company, I think, isn't it, with the red flying horse that
It said General Petroleum Corporation. I was going to ask if we knew who they were.
who's got the answer to that?
I thought it was somehow tied to Mobil Oil because I thought that was part of
I'm
their
sorry.
logo, Mobil Oil Company.
Thank you.
But I could be wrong.
Thank you. Yeah, the flying horse. And you guys still have a copy of the original 16 millimeter, is that right, Craig?
Yes, Tom, we sure do. When we did pull it up on the old projector that he had, the film actually snapped a couple times on us, and due to age and I have no idea what kind of environment it was really ever stored in, but it was pretty darn delicate. So we did take it in. Tracy actually did most of that work to take it in, get it spliced back, and then get it digitized before it just totally deteriorated. So not in the best of shape, but we still do have the acetate film. Probably a pretty good fire hazard right now, actually.
And what was the clarity of the film like?
It was definitely better than what we just saw here tonight, and it was smoother too. I had all the jumpiness on my computer screen, but so it was much more smooth anyway. You had some of that background fuzziness and typical of old movies, and I totally forgot about the very beginning there with the focus your lens and just your volume. Again, this was cutting edge technology back in the day, and they had to make sure that the users were aware of what to look out for, including the fact that the audience's clothing may soak up sound. So I found that pretty amusing.
Yeah, you don't want to leave that out.
It was important back then, at least. Yeah.
That's some very fun stuff. Well, are there any more questions?
I think you have to go. Yeah, it's almost over with. Go to settings and tools.
That may not be for us as a group.
Go to settings and tools, and then once you get the settings and tools, go to general tools, and then it'll say flashlight. Okay.
I think I'm gonna go ahead and mute Gail. Yeah, with that, let's just check. Indeed, thanks to Craig and Tracy for taking the time to digitize this, to get it to us so that we could all see it tonight. As a tribute to your grandfather, Louis Schellbach. Really appreciate your doing this and allowing us to watch this tonight. As a reminder, a month from now, the second Tuesday of every month at 6 o'clock, Brian Bates will be presenting on astroarchaeology in the Grand Canyon, and we hope to see you then for that presentation. Unless anybody else has anything else, that will go ahead and wrap things up for tonight.
Tom, Tom, can you
Hey,
hear
Paul?
me?
Yeah,
I did find that book that we were talking about at the beginning. I said it was the the birds of Grand Canyon, it's the butterflies of Grand Canyon.
Okay,
And the author is Margaret Earhart, Earhart. It's out of press, but I see that Amazon has some used issues of it. And as I say, it fictionalizes people, but it talks about the Schellbachs, and it talks about the Verkamps, and it talks about the Emery, and is trying to figure out whether Emery killed the person that they found in his garage after he died, or who killed that person. So it's an interesting novel.
you know,
Butterflies.
if you're willing, I'd love to maybe try to get a copy and mail it to you and have you put in little sticky notes on who Earhart is talking about when she's writing a certain sections.
Okay, sure.
Because I certainly won't know that backstory for that. That'll be fun.
Yeah, sure. Okay, great.
Cool.
So Tom, this is Mark. Was this show ever shown on the South End?
Mark, I'm sorry, I missed your question. Can you repeat that, please?
Oh, was this film ever displayed at the South End?
No, we covered that at the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
Emery Kolb had.
But after Kolb died, was it shown after he passed away?
After Kolb died, the park looked at it and said, well, it's a little out of date. And it took them a while to come up with a new film. But they did. One of the things they did at the Visitors Center was do a slideshow with multiple projectors fading in, fading out. And they showed that for the tourists. Does anyone remember that?
I know.
That was in the 60s and 70s, if I get that right. Of course, now with the Canyon View Information Plaza, there's a whole theater there, and that film's been going for a while. But yeah, there was a little bookstore and a little film theater there in the Visitor Center, today's park headquarters. And that's what they showed for a while. But that's a good question, Mark.
Hey, Tom, here's that butterfly book. This is what it looks like.
Okay.
This came out in 2009. I actually haven't read it yet. It's on my list.
I was going to say, do you know who she's talking about, Dick? When she talks about all these people in the book?
Well, no. Oh, yeah, I know the people in the book, but I don't know Margaret.
Yes,
I
but
can tell you that she interviewed my Uncle Preston here when she was in the process of writing that book. She actually had a meeting with him at Grand Canyon. I think on the North Rim is what I believe he had told us here. And so he conveyed a lot of the family history, and as well as other people like the Verkamps that he knew and remembered. And she used that information then to create that fictional novel. Personally, I think it's a little, I don't know, it's not much of a story to me, but some people may enjoy it.
well, it sounds like it's historical fiction, and that's the way it should be looked at.
It is that. It is that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Well, with that, let's call it an evening. Thank you all so much for attending, and we'll see you back here same time, same place next month. Y'all have a good evening and take care. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.